silence after the radio died told us everything. We were alone in those mountains, abandoned by the very man who'd sworn to bring us all home. 7 days in hell taught me what men are capable of when they think no one's watching. My name is Sergeant Daniel Roy, and I'm the only one who made it back alive. 20-3 years have passed since the Korengal Valley, Afghanistan, 2008. I was 32 then, leading a squad of 7 men into what they later called a tactical misjudgment. That's what they write in reports when they don't want to say betrayal. I've never told the full story. Not to the brass, not to the families, not even to my wife. But I'm 78 now. The ghosts won't let me take it to the grave. What did our commander say when I finally confronted him years later? If my story means something to you, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. It gives us vets a voice. I see their faces every night before I close my eyes. Not as they were at the end, but as they were before, alive, joking, dreaming of home. Martinez was our medic. Dominican kid from the Bronx with hands steady as granite. He kept a picture of his mother inside his helmet. Said it was better than any Lucky Charm. He was going to medical school when he got back. Gonna heal people proper, he'd say. Then there was Cooper, a farm boy from Nebraska who could shoot the whiskers off a cat at 500 yards. Never shut up about his girl back home in the ring waiting in his footlocker. He was 2 weeks from rotation when we got the orders. Jackson was our comm specialist, this quiet type from Detroit who read philosophy books when everyone else was playing cards. Had a way with languages too. The locals trusted him. Winters and Rodriguez were the inseparable duo. One from Maine, the other from New Mexico. Opposites in every way, but closer than brothers. They'd finished each other's sentences by the 3rd month of deployment. Peterson was the youngest, just 19. Still had acne on his chin and called me sir, even when I told him not to. Wrote to his little sister every week without fail. And Dawson, our lieutenant, West Point graduate with a head for tactics and a genuine care for his men. He questioned the mission more than any of us. K's, maybe he knew something wasn't right. 8 of us went up into those mountains, came down alone. You don't really know men until you've seen them under fire. These weren't just soldiers, they were the best of us. Peterson had saved an Afghan child from a collapsing building 3 months earlier. Cooper had donated half his pay to an orphanage in Kabul. Martinez treated locals after hours, using our precious medical supplies. We weren't just a unit. We were a family, forged in the crucible of war. I remember our last night at base. We sat around eating the same bland rations we'd had for months, but somehow they tasted different. There was laughter, but it was hollow. When you've been in country long enough, you develop instincts. Every one of us felt it's something about this mission didn't add up. Hey Sarge, Peterson had said, his voice too casual. You think we'll all make it back from this one? The tent went quiet. Was the question nobody asked. Keep your head down and your eyes open, I told him. We all go home together. It was the first lie I ever told my men, and the last promise I couldn't keep. None of them deserved what was coming. None of them deserved to be forgotten in some classified report. Their deaths marked as operational casualties. None of them deserved to have their sacrifice buried under the convenient fiction that command later constructed. They had names, they had lives. They had people waiting for them. And somewhere in a drawer in the Pentagon, there's a report that doesn't mention any of that. Just says mission failure and total loss of personnel except for one surviving NCO. That surviving NCO is me. And this is their story as much as it is mine. We'd been in Afghanistan for 11 months when the orders came down. 11 months of patrols, firefights, and building what the brass called rapport with the locals. Korengal, they called it the Valley of Death even then. 6 miles of the most contested ground in the war. Commander Phillips arrived 2 months before the incident. Lieutenant Colonel, career officer with a chest full of ribbons and a smile that never reached his eyes. He replaced a good man who'd been wounded by an IED. "We're going to pacify this valley once and for all," Phillips told us during his first briefing. "Intelligence has identified key Taliban leadership using the Northern Ridge as a transit route. We eliminate them, we change the game." He spoke with such confidence, such certainty. We believed him because we needed to believe someone. Our base was nothing special, some bagged walls, plywood buildings, generators that broke down every other day. Home, such as it was. We'd made it our own. The gym was a few rusted weights under a tarp. Okay. The mess hall served the same 3 meals on rotation. Okay. But it was safe, or as safe as anywhere in that country. We had routines. Dawson led morning PT at 0500. Martinez checked medical supplies twice weekly. Cooper cleaned his rifle every night, whispering to it like it was that girl back home. Little rituals to keep the chaos at bay. The problems started small. Supply requests going unfilled. Intelligence reports arriving late or contradicting previous ones. Phillips sequestered with unknown visitors, voices raised behind closed doors. "Something's off with the new CO," Dawson told me one night, voice low. "He's pushing too hard for this mission, and I can't figure out why." "You questioning orders, Lieutenant?" I asked, though I shared his concerns. "I'm questioning the intelligence, Sarge. These coordinates he's giving us, they don't match any known Taliban movements. I checked with Jackson. Looking back, we should have seen it then." The signs were there. Phillips, isolating himself from other officers, the vague objectives, the unusual urgency. But questioning command isn't in the soldier's DNA. We follow orders. We trust the chain. 3 days before the mission, our interpreter, Nasir, pulled me aside. "Sergeant, people in village saying mountains not safe. More fighters coming, not going. Your commander want to go there now." I reported this to Phillips. He dismissed it with a wave. "Local intelligence is notoriously unreliable, Sergeant. We have better sources. The day before deployment, supplies finally arrived. Not enough cold weather gear for the elevation. Half the requested ammunition. No extra batteries for the radios." "Make do, Sergeant," Phillips said when I brought it up. "I've been assured this will be a quick in and out operation." That night, Cooper sat on his bunk, turning that engagement ring over and over in his fingers. 2 more weeks, he said. "Just 2 more weeks, and I'm out of this shithole." "You'll make it," I told him. "Keep your head down. We'll be fine." Another promise I couldn't keep. None of us slept well that night. You develop a sixth sense in war-crawling feeling when something isn't right. Every man in that squad felt it. But orders were orders, and morning would come whether we slept or not. The Korengal earned its nickname, honestly, Marines, Army. Special Forces, didn't matter who went in. The valley took its toll. By 2008, we'd been fighting there for years with little to show for it. Every ridge and ravine had been paid for in American blood. It's a beautiful place, in its way. Harsh, unforgiving, but beautiful. Pine forests and terrace fields cut into steep mountainsides. Streams that run crystal clear until they turn red during firefights. Villages built like fortresses, because in the Korengal, they always have been. The Soviets failed there in the 80s. We were failing there when I arrived. Some places don't want to be conquered, and the Korengal is one of them. The terrain is the enemy as much as the Taliban, Dawson explained during our prep. He'd studied the topographical maps obsessively. Elevations ranging from 14,000 feet to 4,000 feet. Temperature drops of 50 degrees between day and night. Limited extraction points if things go bad. That last part should have been another warning. The intelligence was troubling from the start. Reports claimed a high-value target was using the northern passes with a small security details, 10 to 15 fighters. But Nazor's contacts in the local villages told a different story. Many fighters coming, he insisted. 40, 50. Maybe they know Americans planning something. Phillips dismissed these reports. Your interpreter has family in the area, correct? Consider his potential biases. Nasir had never steered us wrong before. His information had saved our lives twice in previous operations. But Phillips was the commander with access to intelligence. We couldn't see the day before the mission. A Marine unit returned from a patrol in the adjacent sector. Their staff sergeant sought me out. You heading up north tomorrow? He asked, eyes bloodshot from too many days without proper sleep. Word travels fast, I replied, neither confirming nor denying. We just came through there. Heavy movement, more than usual. Something's brewing. He glanced around, lowered his voice. Watch your six up there. Reported this to Dawson, who took it to Phillips. T response came back. Mission parameters unchanged. Proceed as briefed. That evening, Jackson, our comm specialist, found me checking equipment. Sarge, I've been monitoring local chatter. My Pashto isn't perfect, but they're talking about outsiders in the North Valleys, not locals. Not regular Taliban either. Foreign fighters? Maybe. Or contractors. Someone with serious hardware, based on what I'm picking up. This wasn't in any of our briefings. I asked Jackson if he'd reported this to Commander Phillips directly. Hi, he said it was already factored into the operational planning. But it wasn't in any of the documents we'd seen. None of the briefings mentioned foreign fighters or unusual equipment. Our mission was described as surveillance and potential capture of a mid-level Taliban facilitator. Okay? Nothing that warranted the commanders. Urgency. The final piece came from Cooper, of all people. He'd been on guard duty when a supply helicopter landed. The pilot, an old friend from a previous deployment, pulled him aside. They're setting up blocking positions all through the eastern valleys, the pilot told him. But nothing along your planned exfil route. That's weird, right? It was more than weird. It was either an oversight or deliberate. Neither option was comforting. The pieces were there, scattered like a puzzle we couldn't quite assemble. Intelligence gaps, inconsistent orders, usual movement patterns in the mountains, a commander who brushed aside concerns with practiced ease. We were soldiers. We followed orders. But as we prepared to move out the next morning, every man in that squad knew we were walking into something bigger than we'd been told. The Korengal doesn't forgive mistakes, and it never gives up its dead easily. The command tent smelled of coffee, sweat, and something else stenching maybe. Phillips stood behind a folding table covered with maps, his face illuminated by a hanging lamp that cast more shadows than light. Gentlemen, this is a time-sensitive operation, he began, not looking up from the maps. Intelligence indicates our HVT will be moving through this pass in the next 48 hours. Small security detail, minimal resistance expected. Dawson shifted beside me. We'd been through dozens of briefings together, and I knew his tells. The slight tightening around his eyes meant he was seeing what I was seeing, inconsistencies. In the plan, Phillips circled a narrow passage between two ridges. Insertion here at 0400. Move to this observation point by dawn. Set up and wait. When target is confirmed, capture if possible. Eliminate if necessary. Extraction plan, sir. Dawson asked. Phillips' finger traced a route down the far side of the mountain. You'll proceed to this valley floor where helo extraction will be waiting. Expected mission duration, 36 hours maximum. Weather report shows a front moving in tomorrow night, Dawson noted. Potential for heavy snow at higher elevations. Phillips waved this away. You'll be out before it hits. Next question, sir. I spoke up. Intelligence reports from local sources suggest increased activity in the area. Possibly 40 or more fighters. Phillips fixed me with a stare that would have frozen water. Sergeant Roy, are you an intelligence officer? No, sir. Dan, I suggest you focus on your assignment and leave intelligence assessment to those qualified to make it. Your concerns have been noted and dismissed based on superior information that you are not privy to. The room fell silent. It wasn't just a rebuke, it was the way he delivered it. Cold, rehearsed. Equipment requests, sir, Martinez ventured. We're still short on cold weather gear and medical supplies. Pack light, move fast, Phillips replied. Every ounce slows you down. The quicker you reach the objective, the quicker you're out. It's a question after question met the same wall. Phillips had an answer for everything, but the answers explained nothing. It felt like he was reading from a script that only he could see. As the briefing concluded, Phillips added something unusual. Communications protocol change. All reports will come directly to me, not through standard channels. Radio silence. Unless absolutely necessary, sir. Jackson looked confused. That's counter to standard operating. This is a sensitive operation. Specialist, the fewer people in the loop, the better. We filed out of the tent into the cold night air. Moby spoke until we reached our barracks. That was strange, Cooper said, breaking the silence. Dawson shook his head. Focus on the mission. We adapt and overcome, like always. But even Dawson couldn't hide his concern. Later, as the others prepared their gear, he pulled me aside. Sarge, if things go sideways up there, ... double quotes, he began. They won't, I said, automatically. But if they do, we need to be ready to make our own calls. Phillips isn't giving us the full picture. I nodded. In 12 years of service, I'd never questioned a commanding officer's motives before. Now, I couldn't stop the questions from forming. That night, the mood was somber. Rodriguez wrote a letter to his parents. Cooper stared at that engagement ring for hours. Peterson cleaned his weapon over and over. Preparing for war is its own ritual, each man finding his way to face what might come. I checked and rechecked our gear, trying to compensate for the shortfalls. Not enough cold weather equipment, limited medical supplies, only 2 emergency radios when protocol called for 4. Outside, the mountains loomed black against the night sky. The Korengal was waiting for us, patient and ancient and indifferent to our plans. None of us knew then that we were already abandoned. The mission was compromised before we took our first step into those mountains. But orders were orders, and dawn would come regardless of our doubts. We moved out at 0400. The world still dark and cold around us. No helicopters, too noisy, Phillips had said. Instead, we departed in 2 Humvees to the edge of our operational zone, then continued on foot. By dawn, we were deep in the mountains with nothing but our packs and weapons. The terrain was brutal. Narrow goat paths cut into slopes that dropped hundreds of feet to jagged rocks below. Shale that shifted under our boots. The air thinned as we climbed, making each step harder than the last. Maintain interval, Dawson reminded us as we navigated a particularly treacherous ridge. Cooper, you're bunching up. Okay. The mountains have their own weather patterns. One moment, clear skies, the next swallowed by mist that reduced visibility to arm's length. The cold was another inner-meal living thing that found every gap in our insufficient gear. By midday, we reached our first checkpoint, a cluster of boulders, offering some shelter and a vantage point of the valley below. Jackson's setup comes while Martinez passed out ration bars. Relay 1. This is Watchdog. Radio check. Over. Jackson spoke into the handset, static. Then Phillips' voice, distant and breaking up. Watchdog. This is Relay 1. Proceed to objective. Delta. Maintain radio discipline. Dawson frowned at the transmission. Ask about the weather front. Relay 1. Requesting update on the incoming weather system. Over. More static. Then, weather unchanged. Proceed as planned. But the clouds gathering to the north told a different story. Heavy and dark, moving faster than forecast. Rodriguez, Hood, grown up in mountain country, studied them with concern. "Those aren't regular storm clouds," he muttered. "Okay, that's a blizzard building." We pushed on, following the route marked on our maps. Okay. The path narrowed further, forcing us into single file. I took point, with Cooper behind me, then Peterson. Dawson placed himself in the middle, with Jackson and his precious radio equipment protected. Martinez and Rodriguez covered our rear. That's when I noticed the first sign we were being tracked. A flash of movement across the opposite ridge too. Deliberate for an animal, too quick for a casual observer. Movement, 2 o'clock, approximately 800 meters, I reported quietly. "Confirmed," Cooper murmured, his scope already tracking. Dawson came forward, studied the ridge through binoculars. "Could be shepherds." "No flocks," I pointed out. Shepherds don't usually carry a case." The figure had disappeared into the rocks, but the damage was done. Our presence was known. We continued with heightened vigilance, eyes scanning ridgelines and ravines. The feeling of being watched pressed down heavier than our packs. Near dusk, we reached the planned observation point at defensible position, with good sightlines to the pass where our target was supposed to travel. As the others set up our minimal camp, I pulled Dawson aside. "We're being paralleled," I told him. "At least 2 groups. One on the north ridge, another following our exact route about a kilometer back." He nodded grimly. "I saw them too, maintaining distance, not engaging. Yet," I added. "Yet," he agreed. "Let's check in with Phillips." But when Jackson attempted contact, the radio returned only static. T adjusted frequencies, checked connections. "Something's blocking transmission," he reported. "Or the mountains are interfering worse than expected." "Keep trying," Dawson ordered. Hourly attempts. As darkness fell, the temperature plummeted. We set up a minimal watch rotation, 2 men on, 6 hours each. The storm clouds had swallowed the stars, leaving us in a darkness so complete it felt solid. "Movement won't be until morning," Dawson said as we huddled over the map. "If we're lucky, we observe, report, and extract without engagement." Luck had already abandoned us. We just didn't know it yet. The attack came at first light, when the human body is at its weakest at liminal space between night and day, when reaction times slow and vigilance ebbs. I was on watch with Peterson when the first RPG streaked across the gray dawn. "Contact," I shouted, diving for cover as the projectile exploded against rocks 20 meters from our position. The concussion rattled my teeth, showering us with stone fragments. The others were up instantly, weapons ready, moving to defensive positions we'd identified the night before. Training takes over in moments like these. Your body knows what to do, even as your mind struggles to process the chaos. "Direction," Dawson demanded, crawling to my position. "Multiple," I answered, scanning the ridgelines through my scope. North and east for sure." The second RPG confirmed it fired from a different position than the first. They had us bracketed. "Jackson, get me command," Dawson ordered as the first bursts of small arms fire pinged off rocks around us. Cooper had already found a firing position and was methodically returning fire, his breathing steady, his shots carefully spaced. The farm boy was in his element. 200 meters away, a figure collapsed behind a boulder. "Nice shot," I muttered, squeezing off 3 rounds and a muzzle flash to our right. "Radio's still dead," Jackson reported, frustration evident. "I've tried all frequencies. T's. Some things. Jamming us. That wasn't supposed to happen. Not here. Not with our equipment." "Satellite phone?" Dawson asked. "Same result. No signal." Martinez cried out, then a sharp, surprised sound. I turned to see him clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. "How bad?" I called. "Through." And through, he grunted, already reaching for his med kit with his good hand. "I'll live." The firefight intensified. What Phillips had described as minimal resistance looked more like a coordinated ambush by well-trained fighters. They maintained fire discipline, used cover effectively, and seemed to have intimate knowledge of the terrain. "This isn't Taliban," Rodriguez shouted over the gunfire. "Movements too disciplined." He was right. These weren't the typical hit-and-run tactics we'd encountered before. This was a textbook encirclement designed to pin us down and wear us out. Peterson took a round in the leg 30 minutes in. Martinez, himself wounded, dragged the kid to what cover we had and worked to stop the bleeding. The rest of us maintained a defensive perimeter, conserving ammunition that we now realized was woefully inadequate for a prolonged engagement. "We need to move," Dawson decided after an hour. "They're tightening the noose." He was right. The enemy fire was coming from more directions now. The circle of their positions shrinking around us. Jackson tried the radio again, desperation making his movements jerky. "Relay 1. This is Watchdog. We are taking heavy fire, multiple casualties. Request immediate support." Over. Through the static, impossibly, came a response. "Watchdog, this is Relay 1. Report your situation." Over. Hope flared briefly. Jackson explained our predicament in clipped, professional terms. The response, when it came, extinguished that hope like water on a match. "Understood. Watchdog. Maintain position. Support delayed due to weather conditions. Continue mission parameters." Weather conditions. I looked at the sky clear blue, the storm still hours away. I met Dawson's eyes and saw my own realization mirrored there. "Sir," Jackson said, voice tight, "we are combat ineffective. Wounded. Request immediate extraction." Static. Then negative. "Watchdog. Complete your mission. Relay 1 out." In that moment, we understood. There would be no support, no extraction. We were on our own. "We move now," Dawson ordered, his voice harder than I'd ever heard it. "Eastern Ravine offers the best cover. We'll make for the secondary extraction point." As we gathered our wounded and prepared to move, Cooper voiced what we were all thinking. They knew we were coming. This whole thing was a setup. I had no answer for him then. Would come later, in the long nights of survival that followed. For now, all that mattered was getting my men out alive. We moved like ghosts through the ravine, using what cover we could find. Martina supported Peterson, whose leg wound made each step an exercise in controlled agony. The firing behind us continued. Sporadically, they were making sure we kept moving in the direction they wanted. "They're hurting us," Cooper muttered, as we paused behind a cluster of boulders. He was right. The opposition wasn't trying to kill us, not yet. They were pushing us deeper into the mountains, away from any potential extraction points. Dawson checked the map, his face grim in the strengthening daylight. "Secondary extraction point is here," he said, indicating a relatively flat area 3 kilometers east. "We need to make contact with command." Jackson had been carrying the radio despite the futility of our previous attempts. At Dawson's nod, he tried again. "Relay 1, this is Watchdog. Do you copy?" The static cleared suddenly, as if a switch had been flipped. Commander Phillips' voice came through with unexpected clarity. "Watchdog, this is Relay 1. Report." Dawson took the handset. "Sir, we've been ambushed by what appears to be a professional force, not Taliban. 2 wounded. Proceeding to secondary extraction point. Request immediate air support and medevac." "Hi." There was a pause that stretched too long. When Phillips spoke again, his voice had changed flatter, almost rehearsed. "Lieutenant Dawson, new intelligence indicates high-value targets moving to your position. Proceed to these coordinates and establish observation." He rattled off a series of numbers that would take us even deeper into hostile territory. Farther from any possible rescue, Dawson's knuckles whitened around the handset. "Sir, with respect, we are in a tactical emergency. My men, these are direct orders." Lieutenant Phillips cut in. "National security priorities override your current situation. Acknowledge and comply." The six of us exchanged glances. Wasn't normal protocol. This wasn't how command was supposed to respond to troops in contact. Dawson tried again. "Request confirmation of extraction plan once objective is reached. Extraction dependent on mission success. Proceed to coordinates. Relay 1 out." Radio went dead, not to static, but completely silent. Jackson checked it, brow furrowed. "It's been remotely disabled," he said in disbelief. That shouldn't be possible with our equipment." The implications settled over us like the growing weight of the storm clouds. Whatever we'd been sent to do, it wasn't what we'd been told. Whoever was shooting at us knew exactly where we'd be. And Commander, at least Phillips, had just made it clear that getting us out alive wasn't the priority. "He's writing us off," Rodriguez said flatly. "Or setting us up," Cooper added. Dawson stood silent for a long moment, the deactivated radio in his hands like some useless talisman. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. "We have 2 wounded men, hostile forces in unknown numbers, no communications with base, and a commander who's just given us orders that amount to suicide." He looked at each of us in turn. "As of this moment, we are operating on our own authority. Our mission is now survival and extraction. Understood?" We nodded. In that moment, something fundamental shifted. We were no longer soldiers following orders. We were men fighting to stay alive. "Jackson, any chance of getting the emergency transponder working?" Jackson shook his head. "Already tried. Same problem as the radio. It's been remotely deactivated." "Still have options," I said, taking out my map. "There's a forward operating base here, about 20 clicks south. We can reach it. That's Pakistani territory," Martinez pointed out. "Better diplomatic problems than dead Americans," Dawson replied. As we plotted a new course, Peterson spoke up, his voice strained with pain. "Why would he do it? Why send us out here just to abandon us?" None of us had an answer then. The betrayal was too fresh, too incomprehensible. Command was supposed to protect its people. Officers were supposed to bring their men home. "Save your strength," I told Peterson. We moved in 5 minutes. Behind us, the gunfire had stopped completely. Our pursuers knew we had nowhere to go. The storm front was moving in faster now, stark clouds swallowing the mountain peaks. We were alone in one of the most hostile places on earth. Wounded, outgunned, and betrayed by the very chain of command that was supposed to ensure our survival. And somewhere back at base, Commander Phillips was reporting that we'd been lost to enemy action. Not abandoned, not sacrificed, just another statistic in a war that had already gone on too long. The storm hit sooner than expected, a curtain of white that reduced visibility to mere feet. In any other circumstance, we'd have cursed the weather. Now, it was our only advantage. Blizzard concealed our movement while slowing our pursuers. "We need shelter," Martinez called over the howling wind. He was supporting Peterson, whose face had gone gray with pain and blood loss. "The kid's not going to make it in this cold." Dawson scanned our surroundings, but the snow had transformed the landscape into an alien wasteland. I'd spent enough time in these mountains to know our danger exposed on these slopes. The cold would kill us faster than any bullet. There, Rodriguez pointed to a dark shadow in the white cave entrance, or at least an overhang. We made for it, each step a battle against deepening snow and treacherous footing. It was indeed a cave shallow, but enough to get us out of, to direct wind and provide some tactical cover. Cooper and I took defensive positions at the entrance, while the others settled our wounded deeper inside. Martinez worked on Peterson's leg by the light of a carefully shielded flashlight, his own wounded shoulder forgotten in his focus on saving the younger man. "How is he?" Dawson asked quietly. "Not good," Martinez replied, his voice clinical despite the concern in his eyes. "The bullet nicked his femoral artery. I've got it controlled for now, but he needs surgery, blood, antibiotic stings I don't have." Jackson was examining our remaining supplies. 2 days of rations, if we stretch them. Limited ammunition. First aid supplies, already half gone. He looked up grimly. No working communications equipment. Outside, the storm raged, painting the world in variations of white and gray. It was both salvation and threat. Hid us from our pursuers, but brought its own deadly peril. At these elevations, hypothermia could kill in hours. "They're still out there," Cooper murmured from his position. I caught movement before the snow got too thick. "How many?" I asked. He shook his head. "Hard to tell. But they're not leaving. They don't need to attack," Dawson said. "Time is on their side. They just need to wait us out." Rodriguez joined us at the entrance, his rifle frosted from the snow. "I know these mountains. When the storm breaks, we'll have maybe a 6-hour window before the next one hits. If we're going to move, it has to be then." Deeper in the cave, Peterson moaned softly. Martinez had given him what little morphine we had, but it wasn't enough. The cold had settled into our bones, making every wound more painful, every movement an effort. "We need to get warm," Martinez said, his medical training asserting itself. "Body heat is all we've got." We huddled together in the back of the cave, sharing what little warmth our bodies could generate. The irony wasn't lost on me men who'd fought side by side for months, now pressed together like children seeking comfort in the dark. "Sir," Jackson whispered to Dawson, "I've been thinking about the radio. Remote deactivation, that's classified tech, not something a commander should be able to do from a forward operating base. What are you saying?" "I'm saying whoever shut us down had access to systems way above Philip's pay grade. This goes higher than him." The implication hung in the air, colder than the wind outside. It's not just abandoned by our commander, but by something larger, some operation or agenda we weren't meant to understand or survive. The temperature dropped further. We established a watch rotation, 2 men awake at all times. Both to guard against attack and to ensure nobody fell asleep permanently in the cold. During my watch with Cooper, he spoke for the first time in hours. "My girl's name is Emma," he said suddenly. "We've been together since high school." That ring was her grandmother's. I nodded, understanding what he was doing. In case he didn't make it, someone would remember. "Tell me about her," I said. He smiled faintly. "She's a teacher, kindergarten. Has this laugh that makes everything okay, even when I was deployed." I'd just think about that laugh and know what I was fighting for. Outside, the storm began to ease, the wind dropping from a howl to a moan. Dawn would come in a few hours, bringing with it a brief window of clearer weather and the enemy that we knew was still patiently waiting. "Get some rest," I told Cooper. "I'll wake you when it's time to move. We're not all getting out of here, are we, Sarge?" he asked, his voice steady despite the question. I had no answer. That wasn't a lie, so I said nothing. We both knew the odds. 8 men went up the mountain. How many would come down remained to be seen. Night in the mountains has a weight to it, a presence. The darkness feels alive, watching, waiting. We took turns keeping watch, 2 hours on. For off though sleep came in broken fragments, disrupted by cold and pain and the constant alertness that combat instills. During my watch with Rodriguez, he spoke of home New Mexico, the smell of his mother's cooking, the way the desert looked at sunset, the way men talk when they're not sure they'll see those things again. "My dad fought in Vietnam," he said quietly. "Came back different. I never understood until I got here. Did he talk about it? I asked. Rodriguez shook his head. Never. Not once in 30 years. And now I understand why. He was silent for a long moment. Whatever happens, Sarge, this doesn't end here in these mountains. Someone sent us to die. Someone needs to answer for that. I nodded, though in the darkness he couldn't see it. If any of us make it back, ... Yeah. If. The hours crawled by. The storm subsided briefly, then returned with renewed fury, bringing with it a cold so intense it burned. We rotated positions, keeping blood flowing, fighting the insidious pull of hypothermia. Peterson's condition worsened. His breathing grew shallow, his skin waxy and pale despite Martinez's efforts. During one lucid moment, he grabbed my sleeve with surprising strength. "My sister," he whispered. "Tell her I wasn't scared." "Tell her yourself when we get home," I replied, the lie bitter on my tongue. He smiled faintly. "You're a bad liar, Sarge." Hour before dawn, Martinez pulled me and Dawson aside. "Peterson's going into shock, his body temperature's dropping. I've done everything I can." Dawson nodded grimly. "How long?" "Hours, maybe less." We'd all seen death before. In this war, it was an everyday companion. But not like this, not slowly, helplessly, watching a 19-year-old kid slip away while we could do nothing. "Make him comfortable," Dawson said, finally, and conserve the medical supplies for, he didn't finish the sentence. "For those who might still make it," was the unspoken end, as Martinez returned to his patient. Dawson and I stepped away, speaking in hushed tones. "First light, we move," he said. "Rodriguez says there's a shepherd's path down the eastern face. It's dangerous, but it might get us past their perimeter. And Peterson." Dawson's jaw tightened. "We bring him as far as we can," but we both knew what that meant. In his condition, moving him might kill him faster. Leaving him behind certainly would. Jackson approached, his voice low. "I've been thinking about the mission parameters. Why here? Why us? Does it matter now?" I asked. "It might. The coordinates Phillips gave us originally, I've been studying the map. It's not a transit route or observation post. It's just an unremarkable section of ridge. Your point?" "My point is, we weren't sent to capture anyone. We were sent to that specific location. Me as bait, maybe as witnesses to something, but not for any normal op." It made a sick kind of sense. The incomplete intelligence, the lack of proper equipment, the way Phillips had isolated himself before the mission. "We need to reach that FOB," Dawson concluded. "Not just for survival. We need to report this up the chain, past Phillips." Dawn approached. The storm began to ease again. The brief window Rodriguez had predicted was coming. With it would come our pursuers, rested and ready, while we were exhausted and diminished. Peterson died just before sunrise. No drama, no last words. His breathing simply stopped, his body surrendering to cold and blood loss. Martinez closed the kid's eyes, covered his face with a tactical scarf. He was 19, Cooper said, his voice hollow. "Hey, we marked the location," Dawson decided. "We come back for him when this is over." Another promise we couldn't keep. The mountains don't easily surrender their dead. As pale light filtered through the cave entrance, we prepared to move. 7 men had entered the mountains. 6 remained. 1 lay still beneath a covering of snow. The odds were getting worse, but giving up wasn't an option. Not while Phillips still breathed. Not while the truth of what happened here remained hidden. We moved out into the new day, carrying our dead with us in memory, if not in body. The shepherd's path was barely more than a game trailer narrow track, winding down the eastern face of the mountain. In places, it disappeared entirely, forcing us to scramble across bare rock and loose scree. One misstep meant a fall of hundreds of feet. Conserve water, I reminded the men as we paused on a relatively flat section. Small sips only. Our supplies were critically low. This man had less than half a canister of water remaining. The rations were gone. We'd eaten the last of them that morning. Ammunition was counted by individual rounds now, not magazines. Martinez's condition was deteriorating. The wound in his shoulder had become infected despite his own best efforts to treat it. Fever brightened his eyes and flushed his dark skin. Still, he refused to slow our pace. "I'm fine," he insisted when Jackson tried to take his pack. "Save your strength." We all knew he wasn't fine. None of us were. 2 days of combat, exposure, and minimal sleep had pushed us to the edge of endurance. But the alternative to continuing was death. So we pushed on. The storm was building again to the north. Dark clouds gathering like a physical manifestation of the threat pursuing us. Rodriguez estimated we had 3 hours before it hit 3 hours to put as much distance as possible between us and our hunters. Movement, Cooper suddenly hissed, dropping to a crouch. 2 o'clock, ridgeline. We froze, scanning the indicated direction. At first I saw nothing, then a flash of metal catching the sun, the glint of a rifle scope. "They're paralleling us," Dawson observed, "keeping their distance." "Why not engage?" Jackson wondered. "They've got the high ground, better position." "Because they're not trying to kill us quickly," I realized. "They're wearing us down, waiting for the elements or exhaustion to do their work for them." It was a cold, effective strategy. They knew we were injured, low on supplies, unfamiliar with the terrain. Time was on their side. We continued moving, maintaining vigilance on the ridge where we'd spotted them. More figures appeared, 3, then 5, then more, making no effort to hide their presence now. "They're hurting us again," Cooper said, "pushing us south instead of east." He was right. Every time we tried to turn eastward toward the Pakistani border, shots would ring out, forcing us back to the southern path. Rodriguez stopped abruptly, studying the terrain ahead. "This isn't right," he said, his voice tight. "This path, it's leading into a box canyon. No exit." "You sure?" Dawson asked. "Positive. My uncle used to tell stories about these mountains." This path dead-ends about 2 kilometers ahead. Vertical walls on 3 sides. We looked at each other, understanding dawning. Our pursuers weren't just tracking us, they were driving us into a trap. "Options?" Dawson asked, looking to each of us. "We could double back," Jackson suggested. "Try to break through to the east under cover of the coming storm." "Too risky," I countered. "They've got the high ground and better visibility." "What about straight down?" Cooper pointed to a steep ravine cutting through the mountainside. "It's not a path, but it leads east. It might be passable." Rodriguez studied it. "Dangerous as hell. One slip and you're dead. But it might be our only option." Before Dawson could decide, Martinez collapsed. One moment he was standing, the next crumpled on the rocky ground. His fever had spiked dangerously high, his breathing rapid and shallow. "He needs antibiotics and fluid," Jackson said, helping me prop the medic against a boulder. "He can't go down that ravine." Martinez's eyes fluttered open. "Leave me," he whispered. "I'll slow you down." "It's not happening," I told him firmly. "Sarge is right." Dawson agreed. "We don't leave our people behind." The irony of the statement wasn't lost on any of us, given our circumstances. But whatever betrayal had led us here, we still lived by our own code. "New plan," Dawson decided. "Cooper, you and Rodriguez tried the ravine route. If it's passable, come back for us. The rest of us find defensible position and wait." It was the right call, but splitting our already diminished force felt wrong. Cooper seemed to read my thoughts. "We'll be back, Sarge," he said, with quiet confidence. "Count on it." As they prepared to descend, Martinez grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "If I don't make it," he said, his voice a dry whisper, "tell my mother I did good. Tell her I helped people." "Tell her yourself," I replied, the same lie I'd told Peterson. It didn't sound any more convincing now. Cooper and Rodriguez disappeared over the edge of the ravine, moving carefully down the treacherous slope. The rest of us found what cover we could, preparing for whatever came next pursuit, storm or night. 2 more gone, even if temporarily, for remaining 1 critically injured. And somewhere above us, an enemy of unknown strength waiting patiently for us to falter. The mountains were winning. Hours passed with no sign of Cooper or Rodriguez. The storm hit with full force, bringing stinging sleet that froze on contact and winds that threatened to push us from our precarious perch. Martinez drifted in and out of consciousness, his fever burning through our last supply of Tylenol. "We can't stay here," Jackson said, his voice nearly lost in the howling wind. "If the weather doesn't kill us, they will." He nodded toward the ridgeline where our pursuers had been. Dawson checked his watch out, a reflexive gesture rendered meaningless by the fact that our extraction window had long since closed. There would be no helicopter, no rescue. There was only survival or death. But we wait for Cooper and Rodriguez until dark, he decided. Then we move regardless. But as shadows lengthened across the mountainside, we faced an ugly truth. Our comrades weren't coming back. Either they'd found a way down and couldn't return, or they hadn't made it at all. "We need to assume they made it," Dawson said, though his tone betrayed his doubt. "Can follow the same route." We fashioned a stretcher for Martinez from rifle straps and a thermal blanket. He was barely conscious now, mumbling occasionally in Spanish prayers, perhaps, or messages to the family he might never see again. The descent into the ravine was a nightmare of loose rock and treacherous footing, made worse by darkness and the continuing storm. Each step had to be carefully placed, each handhold tested. We took turns carrying Martinez's stretcher, the weight making the already dangerous climb nearly impossible. Halfway down, Dawson slipped. I lunged for him, catching his pack strap as his feet went out from under him. For one terrible moment, I bore his full weight with one hand, my other desperately gripping a rock outcropping. "Let go," he ordered, eyes meeting mine in the dim light of our single remaining flashlight. "Save yourself and the others." "Not happening, sir," I grunted, muscles screaming as I held him suspended over the drop. Jackson scrambled to help, and together we pulled Dawson back to safety. We paused then, breathing hard, the reality of our situation pressing down harder than the weight of our packs. "Thank you," Dawson said simply. We continued down, inch by precarious inch. Near the bottom, we found the evidence we'd been dreading: a splash of blood on the rocks, a torn piece of fabric from Rodriguez's uniform. The trail continued down, drag marks visible in patches of snow. One man wounded, the other helping him more. One man dragging his comrade's body. The ravine opened into a narrow valley, shadowed and dark even in daylight. Pine trees provided some shelter from the wind and sleet, but brought new dangers: reduced visibility, potential ambush points, tracks Jackson pointed out, recent. 2 sets of boot prints led deeper into the valley, partly obscured by fresh snow, but still visible. Cooper and Rodriguez had made it this far at least. We followed, carrying Martinez between us, alert for any sign of pursuit from above. The valley narrowed further, becoming a slot canyon with steep walls rising on either side. Practically, it was a nightmare, perfect kill zone with no cover, no escape routes. "I don't like this," I muttered to Dawson. "Neither do I," he agreed, "but it's the only way through." The ambush, when it came, was brutally efficient. Gaudy single shot echoed through the canyon, striking Jackson in the chest. He dropped without a sound. "K dead," Before he hit the ground, we dove for what little cover existed. Depressions in the ground, fallen logs, rock outcroppings, barely large enough to shield a man. I dragged Martinez with me, his unconscious form. Dead weight now. Return fire was pointless. We couldn't see the shooter, and ammunition was too precious to waste. Dawson signaled with hand gestures. Wait. Hold position. Minutes stretched into an hour. No more shots came. The silence was almost worse than the gunfire, the knowledge that someone was watching, waiting, playing with us. I finally whispered to Dawson, "We're sitting ducks here." He nodded grimly. "On 3, I'll cover. You take Martinez." But as we prepared to move, a new sound reached us, voices speaking a language that wasn't Pashto or any Afghan dialect I recognized. Then, unbelievably, Cooper's voice, strained but unmistakable. "Lieutenant Dawson, Sergeant Roy, hold your fire. We're coming in." Dawson and I exchanged glances of disbelief. Then, emerging from the shadows ahead, came Cooper, supported by a figure in civilian clothes. Behind them, more civilians, carrying a stretcher with what had to be Rodriguez. "Who are they?" Dawson called out, weapons still raised. "Locals," Cooper replied. "Not Taliban. They found us when Rodriguez fell. They've been helping us." It seemed impossible from strangers in this hostile place. But as they approached, I saw no weapons, only the wary expressions of people who had seen too much war. Then a shot rang out from behind us, and Dawson jerked forward, a red stain blossoming on his shoulder. More shots followed, kicking up dirt around us. Our pursuers had caught up. What happened next remains fragmented in my memory, flashes of chaos like a damaged film reel. The locals scattering for cover, Cooper returning fire. Martinez, somehow, conscious again, pulling the sidearm with trembling hands. I remember Dawson shouting orders, even as blood soaked his uniform. Remembered the thunderous echo of gunfire in the narrow canyon. Remembered the local man who had been helping Cooper, falling, his chest a ruin of torn flesh. And I remember the bullet that found Mia. White-hot poker through my thigh that spun me to the ground. The pain came later. In that moment, there was only impact and surprise. Fall back. Dawson was yelling, his voice growing fainter as shock set in. Into the trees. Move. Cooper was dragging me, my blood leaving a trail in the snow. Martinez was gone, whether dead or escaped. I couldn't tell. Rodriguez too. The world narrowed to Cooper's face above me, grimacing with effort, in the gray sky beyond. "Stay with me, Sarge," he kept saying. "Just a little further." Then his head snapped back, a spray of red mist in the cold air, and he collapsed beside me. His eyes, still open, held nothing but sky. After that, darkness. Hours or minutes, I couldn't tell. I awoke to silence and cold, my leg a throbbing mass of pain. Night had fallen. Around me lay the bodies of my men and the locals who had tried to help them. I was alone among the dead. Shock gave way to clarity. I was bleeding out. Without treatment, I had hours at most. Our pursuers would return at dawn to confirm their kills. My choices were simple: die here or move. I chose to move, using Cooper's knife. I cut strips from his uniform to bind my wound. The bullet had passed through cleanly, missing the artery but tearing muscle. Each movement sent waves of agony up my spine, but pain meant life. I embraced it. I took what supplies I could find: Cooper's remaining ammunition, canteen half full of water, a compass from Dawson's pocket. From the locals, a woolen cap and scarf that might prevent freezing to death. The bodies I couldn't bury. The ground was too frozen, my strength too depleted. Arranged them as best I could, closed their eyes, took their dog tags. Someday, I would return their effects to families who deserved more than a telegram and a folded flag. If I survived, moving at night in mountainous terrain with a leg wound defies rational explanation. It wasn't courage or training. It was rage. It's pure, sustaining fury at Commander Phillips, at whoever had orchestrated this slaughter, at a system that treated soldiers as expendable. Rage kept me warm. Rage kept me moving when my body begged to surrender. I followed the valley eastward, staying under tree cover, using the stars for navigation when they occasionally appeared through breaks in the clouds. Each step was agony. Each moment of rest risked unconsciousness I might never wake from. Dawn found me miles from the ambush site, huddled in a hollow beneath a fallen tree. My leg had swollen to twice its normal size, the makeshift bandage soaked through with blood and melted snow. Fever clouded my thoughts. Thirst scraped my throat raw. The next days blurred together, an endless cycle of painful movement and brief, fitful rest. I ate snow to stay hydrated, chewed pine bark for the minimal calories and to stave off scurvy, a trick learned from a survival instructor years ago. Fashioned a crude crutch from a branch to keep weight off my wounded leg. Hallucinations began on the third day. My dead squad mates walked beside me, offering advice, encouragement, dark humor. Cooper pointed out sniper positions to avoid. Martinez suggested plants that might help with pain and infection. Peterson, the kid we'd lost first, just smiled sadly, never speaking. "You're not real," I told them during a moment of clarity. "Does it matter?" Dawson's shade replied. "We're keeping you alive." Perhaps he was right. The companionship, imaginary though it was, prevented the crushing isolation that kills as surely as cold or hunger. On the fourth day, found water stream, not yet fully frozen. I drank until I vomited, then drank again more slowly. Washed my wound as best I could, fighting unconsciousness as pain nearly overwhelmed me. The wound was infected. The skin around it, hot and red, with telltale streaks extending upward. Without antibiotics, sepsis would kill me before starvation. Still, I moved east, always east, toward the Pakistani border in the faint hope of the forward operating base. When I could no longer walk, I crawled. When crawling became impossible, I rested, then forced myself up to walk again. Time lost meaning. The mountains became my entire world, their cruel beauty, their indifference to human suffering. I spoke aloud to keep myself company, reciting names of my fallen comrades, poems half remembered from school, snippets of songs. On the seventh day, delirious with fever and exhaustion, I stumbled upon salvation, or what seemed like it, through the fog of delirium. A village, small and poor, clinging to the mountainside like a growth of lichen. Smoke rose from stone chimneys. The smell of cooking fires carried on the wind. I collapsed at its edge, no longer able to stand, no longer able to fight. If these were enemies, so be it. The struggle was over as consciousness faded. I saw figures approaching cautiously, speaking in a language I didn't recognize. Not the ones who had hunted us. Different clothes, different weapons, neither friend nor foe, just humans finding another human broken on their doorstep. My last thought before darkness took me. Cooper would never give his ring to Emma. I had failed to bring him home. I awakened to firelight and the low murmur of voices. For a moment, I thought I was back at base, that the whole nightmare had been a fever dream. Then the pain in my leg reasserted itself, and reality crashed back. I was lying on a pallet of blankets in a small stone house. Fire burned in the central hearth, filling the single room with warmth and the scent of wood smoke. An old man sat nearby, watching me with calm, assessing eyes. When he saw I was awake, he spoke in a language I didn't understand, then tried Pashto. When I didn't respond to either, he tried broken English. "American soldier," he said. Not a question. I nodded, my throat too dry for speech. He offered a cup of water, supporting my head as I drank. The simple kindness nearly broke me after days of fighting for survival. Taliban, I managed to ask when I could speak. The old man spat to one side. No Taliban here. Different people. Nuristani. I'd heard of Nuristana, remote region where people spoke their own language, followed their own customs, a place so isolated that some villages had blue-eyed, fair-haired residents, descendants of Alexander the Great's armies who had passed through millennia ago. The men, hunting us? I asked. The old man's face hardened. Not Taliban, not Afghan. Foreign fighters. Come 2 weeks ago. Many weapons. Pay local guides. He drew a finger across his throat. Kill guides after bad men. Foreign fighters. Not the usual insurgents, okay, but something else. Professional. Well equipped. It confirmed what we'd suspected. We'd been set up to encounter something beyond the usual. Tribal militants, over the next days, as my fever broke and strength slowly returned, I learned more. The village had taken me in at great risk to themselves. If the fighters learned they were sheltering an American, they would slaughter everyone. Why help me? I asked the old man, whose name was Tajik. 20 years ago, Russian soldiers killed my son, he replied. One Russian soldier helped me bury him, give food to my family. He shrugged. Men are men, some good, some bad. It's not about uniform. A simple moral calculation that shamed the complex political machinations that had abandoned my squad in these mountains, with the help of a younger villager who spoke better English. I learned what had happened. The foreign fighters, likely private military contractors, though from which country was unclear, had established a base in the northern valleys. They were moving weapons, lots of them, through mountain passes, typically used only by shepherds and smugglers. They paid Taliban to look other way, the younger man, Armin, explained. Very organized. Not first time. It began to make terrible sense. Commander Phillips, sending us to that specific ridge, we would have had a perfect view of something we weren't supposed to see. A weapons transfer, perhaps, or a meeting between people who shouldn't be meeting. Your government people come before fighters, Armin added. In helicopter? Okay. Talk with leader. My blood went cold. American government. He shrugged. Speak English, not soldier clothes. Papers. Many papers. Intelligence officers. Or CIA. Someone had known about the operation and sent us directly into it, either as unwitting witnesses or as sacrificial pawns to maintain deniability. As my strength returned, Tajik's son-in-law, a former medic in the Afghan army, treated my leg wound with a combination of modern, antibiotics, precious commodities in this remote place and traditional herbal poultices. The infection receded, though the damage to the muscle meant I would always walk with a limp at night. I helped teach English to the village children in exchange for the family's protection. During the day, I stayed hidden inside, planning my next move. The Pakistani border was still my best hope. The FOB there would have communication equipment not controlled by Phillips. Armin brought news from other villages, carried by goat herders and travelers. The fighters were still searching for survivors from our squad. They'd found the bodies in the canyon, confirmed most kills, but were uncertain about one me. They offer money for American soldier, Armin said. Dead or alive. Why did they care so much about one injured soldier? I wondered aloud. Because you saw, Tajik said simply. Saw what should not be seen, though I couldn't remember any specific, incriminating details from our ill-fated mission. The fact of our betrayal was evidence enough. Someone in the chain of command had sacrificed 8 American soldiers to protect whatever operation was happening in those mountains. After 2 weeks of recovery, I knew I had to move on. My presence put the village at risk, and the window for reporting what had happened was closing. Phillips would have filed his report by now, whatever fiction he'd created to explain our loss. The night before my planned departure, Taig sat with me by the fire. My father's father fought British soldiers, he said. My father fought Russian soldiers. I fought Taliban. My son will fight. ... He waved his hand, indicating some future enemy. Mountains remain. Men who want power come and go. Okay, there was wisdom in his fatalism. The Korengal had seen empires rise and fall, armies advance and retreat. It would still be standing long after our wars were forgotten. Thank you, I said, the words inadequate for what this family had risked. Tajik nodded once. Truth is payment. Tell truth of what happened here. I promised I would. It was an oath I've kept to this day. I left before dawn, dressed in clothes Tajik had provided the rough garb of a local shepherd, complete with a walking stick that served as both disguise and support for my damaged leg. Arman accompanied me for the first few miles, guiding me through hidden paths toward the Pakistani border. 3 days walking, he said, pointing east. Follow morning sun. At river, turn south. 2 more days to army place. Both knew it wouldn't be that simple. Between me and safety lay miles of some of the most inhospitable terrain on earth, multiple checkpoints, and the fighters still hunting for survivors. Your leg not good, Armin observed as I struggled up a mild incline. Maybe wait longer. But waiting wasn't an option. Each day increased the chance that Philip's version of events would become the official record, that my squad's deaths would be filed away as routine casualties of war. We parted at a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of mountain wilderness. Armin clasped my shoulder in the universal gesture of men sending another into danger. Allah go with you, he said. I watched him disappear back the way we'd come, then turned east, alone again with the mountains and the ghosts of my men. The first day passed without incident. I moved slowly, conserving strength, using the terrain for cover even when it seemed I was alone. The shepherd's disguise was my only protection at a distance. I might pass for a local. Up close, my American features would betray me. I navigated. By sun during day, stars at night. The walking stick became an extension of my body, taking weight off my injured leg. Still, by evening, the wound throbbed mercilessly, and fever threatened to return. The second day brought the first test. Coming around a bend in the path, I encountered 3 men locals, not fighters, but potentially just as dangerous if they recognized me as American. Kept my head down, mumbled a greeting in the few words of Nuristani that Tajik had taught me, and limped past. One called out a question. I didn't understand the words, but the tone was suspicious. I kept walking, heart pounding, hand ready to draw the knife hidden in my robes. Their voices faded behind me. They hadn't followed. That night, snow began to fall against Shintel at first, then building to another mountain storm. I found shelter in a cluster of boulders, creating a windbreak that might prevent freezing to death. Sleep came in fits and starts, interrupted by cold, pain, and the constant vigilance that had become second nature. My squad mates visited me in dreams or hallucinations. I no longer tried to distinguish between the two. They offered advice, arguments, dark jokes. You're going the wrong way, Cooper insisted. The fob is southwest. You're delirious, Martinez countered. Trust the compass, not your instincts. They felt so real, these phantoms keeping me company. Through the endless white dot, dawn brought clearing skies and new challenges. The snow had obscured the path, making navigation harder and movement more treacherous. My injured leg protested each step with fresh pain. I fashioned a crude snowshoe from branches and strips of cloth, which helped somewhat. Midday, I spotted aircraft helicopter moving along the border. Military, but whether American or Pakistani, I couldn't tell. Either might mean safety or new dangers if they were working with whoever had betrayed us. I was so focused on the helicopter that I nearly walked into a patrol. 4 men with the bearing and equipment of professional soldiers, not local fighters. I dropped to the snow behind a ridge just as they crested a hill 200 meters ahead. For hours, I remained motionless, half buried in snow, watching as they methodically searched the area. Their pattern suggested training. Their communications were disciplined, not Taliban, not local militia, something else. When they finally moved on, darkness was falling. I had lost precious daylight, and the temperature was plummeting again. Moving at night was dangerous, but freezing to death was certain if I remained exposed. I pushed on, following a stream that Armin had said would lead to the river, marking the border. The water was mostly frozen, but occasional breaks in the ice allowed me to refill my canteen. Each sip was like swallowing knives, the cold so intense it burned. The hallucinations worsened with exhaustion. Now I saw not just my squad mates, but Commander Phillips, watching from ridgelines, his expression smug. The line between rage and madness grew thinner. I found myself shouting challenges at his phantom, then catching myself noise meant death. In this environment, on the 4th day, I reached the river. Armand had described a churning mass of gray water, partially covered with ice sheets. The border. On the far side lay Pakistan, the fob, potential safety, but the crossing points were guarded. Through scavenged binoculars, taken from one of my fallen comrades, I could see checkpoints on both sides, Pakistani military on the far bank, unclear forces on the near side. Going through officially wasn't an option. With no identification and dressed as a local, I'd be detained, questioned, possibly turned over to Afghan authorities who might be compromised. I spent a day scouting up and down the riverbank, looking for an unguarded crossing point. My strength was failing. The wound in my leg had reopened, leaving a trail of blood-spotted snow behind me. Fever clouded my thoughts. 10 miles downriver, I found what I needed: a place where the river narrowed, with ice thick enough to attempt crossing. The risks were enormous. The ice might break. The current below was powerful enough to sweep away even a healthy man, let alone one weakened by injury and starvation. As darkness fell, I began the crossing, testing each step, spreading my weight as I'd been taught in cold weather training. Halfway across, the ice shifted beneath me, a deep cracking sound that sent adrenaline surging through my depleted body. "Keep moving," Dawson's ghost advised. "Faster is safer now." I abandoned caution, scrambling across the groaning ice as it began to fragment beneath me. 3 meters from the far shore, it gave way completely. The shock of the freezing water drove the breath from my lungs. The current grabbed me, pulling me downstream. Pure instinct took over. I fought toward the bank, the walking stick somehow still in my grasp. I jammed it into the riverbed, using it as an anchor against the current, and dragged myself onto Pakistani soil, gasping and shaking uncontrollably. I had crossed the border, but I was soaking wet in sub-zero temperatures, miles from the FOB, with night falling. I had escaped one death, only to face another. What saved me that night was luck, the one factor no training manual accounts for. Half-conscious, hypothermic, I stumbled upon a Pakistani border patrol. They found me collapsed in the snow, more dead than alive. I remember fragments of what followed, being carried on a stretcher. The rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors, voices speaking Urdu and English, the blessed warmth of emergency blankets, the sting of IES being inserted. I awoke 3 days later in a military hospital at the fob I had been trying to reach. A U.S. Army doctor was checking my vitals, his expression changing from professional detachment to surprise when he saw I was conscious. "Welcome back, Sergeant," he said. "You've been out for a while." My first coherent question was about my squad. Some irrational part of me hoped that others had survived, that I'd find them here, wounded but alive. The doctor's face told me everything before he spoke. "I'm sorry," recovery teams found the bodies of 7 U.S. soldiers in the mountains. You're the only one they found alive. 7, not 8. One was still missing, likely Rodriguez, whose body had been on a stretcher when the ambush happened. That detail would haunt me later, within hours of regaining consciousness. I was visited by officers from military intelligence. They sat beside my bed with recorders and notebooks, collecting my statement about what had happened. I told them everything, the mission parameters. Phillips' strange behavior, the ambush. The foreign fighters. They asked detailed questions about the weapons I'd seen, the language the fighters had spoken, the exact coordinates where events had occurred. I provided what I could remember, emphasized the evidence of betrayal. This will all go into the official investigation, the senior officer assured me. These are serious allegations against a commanding officer. I believed him then. Understand yet how the machinery of silence worked. 2 days later, I was transferred to Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany. The doctor who approved my transfer wasn't the same one who had treated me initially. My medical records noted possible traumatic delirium and psychological stress consistent with survivor's guilt. The first hint of the narrative being constructed. Around me, in Germany, more debriefings, more questions, but subtly different now. How much sleep had I gotten during those days in the mountains? Had taken any medications that might affect memory or perception? Was it possible I had misinterpreted Phillips' instructions due to combat stress? My leg required surgery, extensive reconstruction of the muscle and surrounding tissue. During my recovery, a liaison officer brought news. Commander Phillips had submitted his report on the incident. According to him, our squad had diverted from assigned coordinates despite direct orders, engaged enemy forces without authorization, and been killed in a resulting firefight. That's a lie, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside. The officer's expression was sympathetic, but unhelpful. The investigation is ongoing. Your statement is part of the record, but I was beginning to understand. Phillips had powerful protection somewhere in the chain of command. Whatever he'd been involved with in those mountains was being buried along with my men after 6 weeks in Germany. I was transferred to Walter Reed. More surgeries, physical therapy, psych evaluations. I was healing physically, but the crawling sense of betrayal infected every interaction with the military bureaucracy. I requested copies of the official report. Still classified pending investigation, came the response. I asked to speak with the families of my men. Not advisable until the investigation concludes, I was told. I demanded to know what had happened to Rodriguez's body. Recovery operations continue when conditions permit, was the non-answer. The machinery of silence ground forward. My security clearance was quietly downgraded. My access to certain records disappeared. My medical file grew thick with notes about persistent traumatic fixation and paranoid ideation. They were building a box around me, the traumatized soul survivor, to be pitied rather than believed. 3 months after the incident, a JAG officer visited my hospital room, straight-backed, uncomfortable. He informed me that the investigation had concluded. Phillips had been cleared of wrongdoing. The official finding: operational casualties resulting from failure to follow direct orders. My men are being blamed for their own deaths, I said, the words ash in my mouth. The report acknowledges your heroism in survival and attempted rescue, he offered, as if that mattered. What about the foreign fighters? The weapons transfers the villagers told me about. No evidence was found to support those claims. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. He knew he was delivering lies packaged as conclusions. I had one card left to play. I'm going to speak to the press. Tell the real story. His expression didn't change. That would be inadvisable, Sergeant. The operation involved classified elements. Disclosure would violate several statutes, possibly resulting in court-martial. The threat was clear. Speak and face charges. My word against the official report, my damaged body and traumatized mind against the full weight of military authority. 2 weeks later, I received my medical discharge, later than expected, with a disability rating that seemed generous until I realized its purpose. I was being removed from the system. My ability to access information or press my case diminished by civilian status. As I left Walter Reed for the last time, nurse handed me a package that had been delivered for me. Inside was a worn compass, the same one I had taken from Dawson's body in the mountains. No note, no explanation of how it had been recovered or by whom, just a reminder that someone, somewhere, knew the truth. I returned to a country that had already forgotten about 8 soldiers lost in a distant mountain range. The war ground on, producing fresh casualties and fresh distractions. My squad became statistics, their sacrifice reduced to names on a memorial wall. The nightmares began then not of the fighting or the survival ordeal, but of Cooper's eyes as the bullet found him, of Martinez's fevered mumblings, of Peterson's quiet acceptance of death, of promises I couldn't keep. I had survived. Up it. The mountains had claimed something vital anyway, the belief that our sacrifice meant something, that our country wouldn't betray its own. 15 years passed before I found him. 15 years of physical rehabilitation, of nightmares, of searching for answers in classified documents and redacted reports. 15 years of carrying the weight of 7 dead men. Phillips had retired with full honors 2 years after the Korengal incident. Colonel by then, with a chest full of commendations and a consulting position with a private military contractor. The system had rewarded him for his silence. I tracked him through veterans networks, military social media groups, the occasional news mention. He'd settled in Virginia, close to the Pentagon, in the corridors of power he'd served so faithfully, a comfortable retirement built on the bodies of my squad. I didn't approach him immediately. First, I gathered what evidence I could, fragments of the truth scattered through Freedom of Information requests. Conversations with officers who'd been stationed at our base, declassified satellite imagery of the region during that period. None of it was enough to reopen the case or challenge the official narrative, but it confirmed what I'd known in my bones. We'd been sacrificed to protect something larger. When I finally called him, his voice showed no recognition of my name. Sergeant Daniel Roy, I repeated. Korengal Valley, 2008. A pause. Then, I remember. The survivor. We need to talk. Another pause. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Either we talk privately, or I start talking publicly. Your choice. He suggested a diner just off I-95, midway between his home and mine. Neutral ground, public. Enough to prevent violence, private enough for conversation. I arrived early, chose a booth with a clear view of the entrance, my back to the walled habits that 15 years of civilian life hadn't broken. My damaged leg ached from the drive. A permanent reminder of what I'd lost in those mountains. Phillips entered precisely on time. Military punctuality intact in retirement. He'd aged well, silver hair, tanned face, the confident posture of a man who sleeps easily at night. He spotted me immediately, his expression revealing nothing as he approached. Roy, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. Colonel, I replied, the title bitter in my mouth. He ordered coffee. I ordered nothing. My stomach was a knot of anger and anticipation. For 15 years, I'd imagined this confrontation rehearsed. Accusations, pictured, remorse, or defiance. The reality was more mundane. Just 2 aging men in a roadside diner. The classic American scene, hiding the blood between us. You look well, he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. Considering you've left 8 men to die. The words came out flat, controlled. I'd promised myself I wouldn't lose control, wouldn't give him the satisfaction. That's not what happened. No emotion, just a statement. Tell me what happened then. He studied me for a long moment. What's your end game here, Roy? Revenge? Justice? Neither is on the menu. The truth. That's all I want. A tired smile crossed his face. Truth is rarely simple in our line of work. Try me. He sighed, glanced around to ensure no one was within earshot. That mission was compromised before you ever left base. He had intelligence that a high-level meeting was occurring in those mountain CIA assets. Tribal leaders and representatives from Pakistan's ISI, strictly off-books diplomacy. And you sent us straight into it. Not my call. The operation was hijacked. At the last minute, I was ordered to redirect your squad to those coordinates to create a controlled distraction while the meeting concluded. My hand tightened around my water glass. Controlled distraction. You mean cannon fodder? You weren't supposed to engage directly. Just draw attention to a different sector. A show of force. Nothing more. His voice remained even, reasonable, the voice of a man explaining a tactical necessity. Then why cut communications? Why block extraction? Something flickered across his face, the first crack in his composure. That wasn't the plan. When your squad made contacts with the security forces, things escalated. Decisions were made above my pay grade. By who? Does it matter? State Department, CIA, Pentagon lines blur in operations like that. I was told to maintain deniability at all costs, that your squad had become collateral damage. The casual bureaucratic term for my dead brothers ignited something in me. I leaned forward, voice dropped into a whisper that contained all my rage. Their names were Cooper, Martinez, Peterson, Jackson, Rodriguez, Winters, and Lieutenant Dawson. They had families. They had lives. They weren't collateral anything. Phillips had the decency to look away. I know their names. I've carried them too. Not like I have. I pulled up my pant leg, showing the massive scar tissue where muscle should be, and not like their families have. What do you want me to say, Rye? That I'm sorry? I am. That I had a choice. I didn't. You could have warned us, given us some indication of what we were walking into, and violated direct orders. Compromised an operation with national security implications. Yes, I said simply. That's exactly what you should have done. He shook his head. Then we have different understandings of duty. Duty to who? Not to your men. Not to the oath we all took. To the larger mission. To the country. Not just 8 soldiers. He spoke with the conviction of someone who'd justified this to himself 1,000 times. Did you know I was alive? After? His eyes met mine directly. We received intelligence that there might be a survivor. That's why recovery operations continued longer than standard protocol. But you never looked for me personally. It was out of my hands by then. The entire incident was contained, classified. I laughed bitterly. Contained, like a toxic spill. Essentially, yes. No pretense now. It's too many powerful interests involved. Pakistani intelligence, CIA operations, channel diplomacy. The death of 8 soldiers was regrettable, but acceptable in the broader strategic calculation. It's acceptable. To who? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. We both knew how the machine worked, how lives were weighed against objectives, how sacrifices were calculated in air-conditioned offices thousands of miles from the blood and dirt. I need you to know something, I said after a long silence. I made it to a village. The locals there told me about weapons transfers, about American officials meeting with foreign fighters, things that weren't in any briefing. His expression didn't change, but I saw his hand tighten around his coffee cup. What I saw in those mountains, what got my men killed, wasn't diplomacy. It was something else, something worth covering up with 8 American lives. Be careful, Roy, he said quietly. Some doors are better left closed. I've lived in this hell for 15 years. I've earned the right to know what my men died for. Phillips was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket, removed a flash drive, and slid it across the table. This contains everything I have. Names, dates, operational details. I've kept it as ... insurance. Take it or don't. But understand, you use it, there will be consequences. Not just for me. I pocketed the drive without looking at it. Why give me this now? He stood to leave, dropped money on the table for his untouched coffee. Because you're right about one thing. Okay. We owe the dead something better than lies. As he turned to go, I asked a question that had haunted me for 15 years. Could you have saved them? You've made a different call? He paused, his back to me. I don't allow myself to think about that. Neither should you. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with a flash drive and a ghost that had followed me from the mountains. I never saw Phillips again. 6 months later, his death was reported as a single-car accident on a deserted road. The official finding, driver fatigue. The unofficial whispers, suicide, or something designed to look like it. The flash drive contained exactly what he'd promised. Names, operational details, evidence of a covert weapons program being run through private contractors with plausible deniability for all involved. Everything needed to blow open the truth about what happened in the Korengal. VE never used it. Not because I fear the consequences, but because I finally understood the most important truth. No revelation would bring my men back. No exposure would heal what had been broken in those mountains. Some truths serve only the dead, and I had promised to live. I'm 78 now. The young sergeant who crawled out of those mountains exists only in memory and nightmares. My hair has gone white, my damaged leg more pronounced with each passing year. The doctors say the pain will never fully disappear. Nerve damage is permanent. Like the memories, I've lived a life that would seem ordinary from the outside. After discharge, I used my military benefits to get a degree in counseling. Worked with veterans for decades, helping them navigate the same bureaucratic maze I'd fought through. Married a patient, kind woman who accepted that there were parts of me she would never reach. Had children who grew up knowing their father sometimes went away inside himself, staring at nothing, visiting a place they couldn't follow. Normal life, built atop an abyss. I kept my promise to Martinez. 5 years after we lost him, I found his mother in the Bronx, a tiny, fierce woman who invited me into her home and fed me while I told her that her son had died trying to save others. That he had been brave and skilled and deeply missed. Left out the betrayal, the futility. She deserved better memories than those. Cooper's Emma had already remarried by the time I tracked her down. She had a toddler, a new life built from the wreckage of plans destroyed in the Korengal. I gave her the ring I'd recovered from Cooper's body, told her how he'd spoken of her laugh. She cried, but they weren't entirely tears of sadness. Sometimes closure is its own kind of gift. One by one, I visited them, all the families of my law squad. Some welcomed me, desperate for details that the official notifications had omitted. Others couldn't bear to reopen wounds that had begun to heal. I respected both responses. Grief has no correct procedure, no field manual to follow. I never told them about Phillips, about the flash drive, about the real reason their sons and husbands and brothers had died. What purpose would it serve? Their loved ones were just as dead, their sacrifice just as permanent. Truth isn't always a kindness. The nightmares evolved over the years. First, they were literal: the ambush, the cold, the hunger, the faces of my men as they died. Later, they became more abstract, tentless mountain paths leading nowhere. Radio static with voices just below comprehension. Snow that turned to blood beneath my feet. I learned to live with them, these night visitors. They were the price of survival. The interest paid on a debt I could never fully discharge. The hallucinations faded once I returned to civilization. But my squad mates never fully left. I still feel their presence, sometimes Cooper's steady hand, when my aim falters at the shooting range, Martinez's calm competence when I face a crisis, Dawson's measured judgment when decisions must be made. Not ghosts, exactly. More like the parts of them I've carried forward, incorporated into myself. The dead live on in the way they change the living. I kept tabs on Philip's old network, the officers and officials mentioned in his files. Okay, over the years, they rose through the ranks, received promotions, retired with honors. Some entered politics. Others joined defense contractors or consulting firms. The machinery that had consumed my men continued operating, smooth and efficient. Occasionally, I recognized a pattern, repeating small units lost in remote locations, official reports, citing operational hazards or failure to follow mission parameters. The same sanitized language, the same quiet burials. The war machine has an endless appetite. I considered going public many times, during the darkest nights, when the pain in my leg kept sleep at bay and the faces of my men seemed more real than the bedroom around me. I would take out the flash drive and imagine releasing its contents, exposing the lies, toppling the careful constructions of deniability. But to what end? The dead would remain dead. The system would find scapegoats, sacrificial offerings to preserve itself. New lies would replace the old. The families who had found some measure of peace would have even that taken from them. So I chose a different path. I worked within the system, advocating for better support for wounded veterans, fighting for accountability in treatment programs, ensuring that the living weren't abandoned as my squad had been. Small victories, measured in individual lives, improved rather than systems overturned. Is that a portrayal of my promise to tell the truth? Perhaps, but truth takes many forms. Sometimes it's a thunderous revelation. Sometimes it's the quiet acknowledgement of what cannot be changed. Last year, I returned to Afghanistan. Not to the Korengal Mountains have claimed enough of me already, but to Kabul, now transformed by decades of war and fragile peace. I visited schools built with international aid, hospitals where Afghan doctors trained in America treated their countrymen, markets where life continued despite everything. I wanted to see if any meaning could be salvaged from what we lost there, if the sacrifice not just of my squad, but of thousands of Americans and tens of thousands of Afghans have purchased anything of value. The answer isn't simple. Nothing about war ever is. I saw progress and regression, hope and despair, the seeds of future conflicts and the potential for reconciliation. I saw a country marked by the same powers that had marked Muscard, but enduring. I'm an old man now. The war that claimed my squad has been relegated to history books, overshadowed by newer conflicts, fresher losses. Most Americans couldn't find the Korengal on a map, couldn't name the battles fought there, couldn't tell you why we were there in the first place. But I remember, I carried the names of my men like stones in my pockets, moved from constant handling, heavy with significance. Cooper, Martinez, Peterson, Jackson, Rodriguez, Winters, Dawson, not statistics or cautionary tales or symbols of a failed policy. Just men, good men, who deserved better than they received. If there's any lesson in what happened to us, perhaps it's this. Systems, military, political, bureaucratic will always prioritize their own survival. They will sacrifice individuals without hesitation, then justify that sacrifice with appeals to greater goods and necessary evils. The machinery has no conscience, only inertia. But within those systems are people who can make different choices. Phillips could have warned us. His superiors could have aborted the mission. Someone, at any point, could have valued 8 American lives above whatever clandestine objective we were sacrificed for. They didn't. But remembering that they could have, that's important. It means what happened wasn't inevitable. It means someone was responsible. I'm telling this story now, after all these years, because time is running short. The damage to my leg has spread, complications compounding. The doctors speak in euphemisms, but I understand the prognosis. I'll be joining my squad soon enough. Before I do, I wanted to leave this record. Not the classified details, those will remain sealed. The flash drive destroyed. Tapped, but the human truth of what happened. The story of 8 men sent into mountains they would never leave, of promises that couldn't be kept, of a system that valued secrecy above the lives of its soldiers. I don't expect justice at this late date. I don't even want vengeance anymore. Those emotions burned out long ago, leaving only a weary understanding of how the world works. What I want is remembrance. For someone, somewhere, to know that Daniel Roy and his squad existed. That we fought not just against an enemy, but against betrayal and indifference. That one of us made it home to tell the story. If you've stayed with me this long, I thank you. Ain't listening, you've helped fulfill the promise I made too. Keiki, in that mountain village, to tell the truth of what happened there. Not the strategic truth or the political truth, but the human truth. The only kind that really matters in the end. If you made it to the end, thank you. Let me know where you're from in the comments. It helps to know this story is being heard.